Deborah, thanks so much for being a part of the show. I've said before I hit record how it's like I feel like every week we're kind of seeing each other because I was on your show and then we had some chats in between. And so here we are. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. And I'm excited for this conversation.
I'm excited for this conversation too. And if I get to see you weekly, how fun.
Yeah, let's put this in the calendar, shall
Yes.
we? Yes.
Yes.
So, can you just let's just start out with you just sharing your story, like where you want to go from there. And I know that this conversation is going to be super powerful. So, over to
Okay.
you.
All right. So let's start off when I was really little, when I was a baby. I was like 7 months old. My mom's brother died. He was 19. And it was the second child that my grandparents had lost. They had four kids. My mom, then 2 years later, they had a boy and he died when he was like 8 months old. Then they had almost 2 years to the day after he died, they had another son. And so my mom was 4 years older than him. And then when my mom was 13, they had their third son. So when I was a baby, her second brother was 19 and he died. And, horribly, that my grandparents lost two of their four children. My grandmother was my main person in life from my entire life. And I spent my entire early childhood from a baby until basically when I went to school, going to the cemetery like every day of my life. There was a period of time when my mom and I lived with my grandparents. My parents were separated for a little while when I was very young and we lived with my grandparents. My grandmother learned how to drive so that she could go to the cemetery every day because my grandfather would come home from work and have to take her and he was like, I can't do this every day. So she wanted to go, so she learned how to drive and would take me. We would go out to lunch and then we would go to the cemetery every day. And she told me that the cemetery was where Snow White lived. And I believed her because why would she not tell me the truth? It's my main person. And so it was a Catholic cemetery, and any statues that were of the Blessed Mother were Snow White, the angels were the seven dwarfs, you know, anything that was like Jesus or even Saint Michael was Prince Charming. And I believe that all the mausoleums, not that our family had any of them, but the mausoleums that were there, that they were like where the seven dwarfs lived. And I would try like trounce and flounce and walk all through the cemetery and blah, 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 blah. And as most little children are, I was highly intuitive, right?
Yeah.
And I would say things. My uncles that passed were named Anthony and Robert. And I would be like, and Anthony and Robert are playing, and we're going to do this, and we're doing that. And, the adults in my life would be like, ah. Then, throughout my childhood, I was always really, like I said, like most little kids are, highly intuitive, but I was very vocal about it. And I would get in trouble for it all the time. I just would know things about the adults and I would like spit them out. And then my mom would be like, that's disrespectful, right? Like, you can't say that. Why are you saying that? And I think it freaked her out too, right?
Yeah, because it's like, how did you know that? Did you overhear something? How it's just
Right.
so interesting to me, Deborah. Like when we had the conversation and you talked about your childhood, like hanging out at cemeteries. I mean, when I was a child, there were some cemeteries around where I grew up, and it was freaking scary. It was like the haunted house, like there was no fairy tale, anything. And it just
Hmm.
is so, it was like, oh, it was creepy. I just always had this freaked out view of cemeteries, like that's where the dead people are. And my dad used to say, don't, you shouldn't be afraid of the people, the dead people. You need to be afraid of the living, right?
My family always would say that too. You have to fear the living, not the dead. They'll
Yeah.
never hurt you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I just found that like to be so fascinating, but also the grief of your
Oh,
grandmother. And then did you ever have a conversation? I know we're jumping, but did you
sure.
have a conversation with her about like ever talking about her grief and like why she went every day? Was it she was just that was she felt closest to him or
No, we never discussed it. It was just that's what she did. for
Wow.
years. I'm talking like decades. That's what she did.
Wow.
Definitely the first decade that he was gone. So they're all the first years of my life, right? So
Yeah.
like it's a joke, but it's not a joke. Like I was born into expectation and obligation and raised in grief, guilt, and shame. Like, welcome to my TED Talk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, right. Because like literally.
Literally, like
Yeah.
that was my life. And so, her two sons were there. I guess that's where she felt closest to them. Um, and then, as I got older, I started to kind of hide my intuition. I started to hide my gifts, right?
Yeah.
It made me feel like people didn't get it. Like I was weird or whatever. So I learned how to mask and hide it, right? And, I grow up, I basically use it to try and keep myself safe, like most people do, right? Like you get that creepy feeling from somebody, and if it feels creepy, it is creepy, get away. But there have been certain times in my life where I've had such a strong knowing about things in my life that, that would not go away. And sometimes I followed the knowing, and sometimes I didn't follow the knowing, right?
Hmm.
And I had this huge experience happen that my husband and I were buying a business. And I knew with every fiber of my being to not do it. I knew it was wrong. I knew there were lies being told. I knew information was being withheld, but I also couldn't prove it. And I was kind of confused as to how much is this my intuition and how much is this my fear, because I'm going into a situation that I'm going to incur debt, and I've never had debt like this, right? So
Right.
of course I'm scared. And then I start weighing it and blah 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 blah. We but every time I ask myself the question, should we do this? The answer never changed. It always was no. And then I would fight with myself and do all these things, but the answer never ever ever changed from no. We move on with it. It's a nightmare situation, but I learned so much, right? And literally I can do anything. That experience taught me I can figure anything out. I can do anything that I had to. And so it put me on this path of what's your intuition and what's fear. And during that time was when I started meditating, when we had that business. And I started to receive energy work. And then we closed the business, incurred an enormous amount of debt from closing earlier than we, expected. But the lease was up, and I'm like, I can't do it another second. And then we move on. And I start to really study like, what's the difference and what's energy work? I go down this path. Okay. Fast forward to 2017. But when we had this business, let me backtrack. I got this like message, like learn how to meditate. I was coming undone, right? I'm so stressed. I have 3 kids. I went from being home all the time, working very part time as a personal trainer and group fitness instructor. I'm there for everything, to never being home and missing giant chunks in my children's lives. That wasn't the kind of parent I was, and it was killing me. And I get this hit that's like learn how to meditate, and that put me on. I started to learn how to meditate in my intro to energy work. Now, fast forward, it's 2017. The business is closed. I'm working for a friend, and I get another message that's like, you need to meditate every day. Do it. And I'm like, so I was meditating. I started in 2012, but I wasn't doing it every day. And I was like, all right, but how am I going to do? I quit everything, everything. How am I going to do this? And I had had a near death experience in 2005. So I would be like, I even quit life a little bit. Like, I can't count on myself for anything. So I make this deal with myself. I just have to do it for a minute a day. And if I could meditate every day for a year, just 1 minute, what would happen to my life? Something was going to happen to my life. I knew it, but I had to stick to this. And I don't, I'm a coach, and I don't ever recommend anybody make a giant time promise. Like a year is too
A
long.
year.
Yeah. Like, let's do it for 5 days. Let's do it for 3 days, and then we'll increase. But nope, I went all in, a year, a minute a day. And in that year, So my life opened up in ways that I couldn't imagine. And at the end of the year, when I realized I did it, like I kept this promise to myself, it kicked my confidence up so high. And it got me in touch with people that I would have never met otherwise. And it grew. It helped me open up my spiritual gifts, and it helped me strengthen my intuition. And I ultimately ended up starting a business, leaving my 9 to 5, and blah, blah, blah. Then I started to have this situation a few years ago where I really felt terrible. I mean, so terrible, so worn down. And we had a lot going on. My sister was relocating from the West Coast in the US to the East Coast back to where we're from. She was moving home after like 25 years. We were helping her she's looking at houses like on FaceTime, and we're meeting the realtor and going through the houses. So that's a big thing. One of my kids is married and they're having a baby and buying a new house. One of my kids relocated to New York City and moved twice, and we moved them. My youngest was in college, moved her a bunch of times. We decided to sell the house that we raised the kids in and lived in longer than any place in our lives. All these things are happening, right? So I'm exhausted. I go to the doctor and I say to her, something's wrong with me. And she's like, you're in menopause, lose weight. And I'm like, no, so I'm sick. Something's wrong with me. She's like, no, 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 menopause, menopause, menopause. So I'm in my mid 50s. So now I'm like, this isn't menopause. I know that it's not. I'm sick and I feel it. And and it sounds crazy, but I could feel my life leaking out of my body. And had I not had that near death experience, I don't know that I would know that that's what the feeling was, but I could feel it like just leaking out of me. And I couldn't get a doctor to listen to me. And this went on for over 2 years, right? So, as I sit one morning and I'm like, "Okay," to meditate and pray, and I'm like, "Send me to the right doctor. Just let me find the right doctor." And right away, I go to the cardiologist. Now, my family I have a strong family history of heart disease. Saw a cardiologist years ago. She was fabulous. I was fine. I'm like, "Let me go back." I go to her. And the thing that I had that was strange that no one would pay attention to because all of my blood work was fine. When you would listen to my breathing, it was fine. Everything was fine on paper. I would lose my breath talking every once in a while. That's not normal. And I teach meditation and breath work. Like I'm conscious of my breath all the time. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. But everybody was like, every doctor that I went to was like, lose weight, it's menopause, menopause, menopause. All weird things can happen. That's probably just the side effect. And I'm like, you're all wrong. I go to the cardiologist. I tell her every single thing of how I feel. She's like, I don't like it. That doesn't sound right. She orders a test for my heart, but it will show my lungs. I I left having the test done. I'm not home 3 hours and they call. I have a tumor and you need to be seen like immediately by a pulmonologist. I go through all the steps. I have a PET scan. I have an exam. I have a PET scan. I have a biopsy. I have cancer. And when they tell me, I'm like, I freaking knew it. I knew it. I knew that I had cancer. So I had a tumor, but I also had tiny nodules. That's what they were calling them next to the tumor that were so tiny, they couldn't be biopsy, just the bigger one. And that wasn't even big. The tumor that I had was not big. So now I have to have the lower lobe of my left lung removed. In the
Mm.
meantime, I need to change doctors and health systems because the doctor that I was seeing they never called with my biopsy results. It was like I had to chase them for everything. And I'm like, this is not right. Okay. This is terrible. So now I change and I end up with this angel of a doctor. He's like a living, walking angel. And the first doctor told me, you would never feel any of this. This is all in your mind. You're not feeling any of those symptoms. Your tumor is too small for you to feel anything. And I'm like, you're wrong. I'm like the princess and the pea. I feel everything. I am in communication with my body. Like my body, it was literally telling me it was unwell, right? And I guess they're not used to people being so embodied or
Mm,
such an advocate for themselves, right?
yeah.
So I change and I get this surgeon who is, like I said, an angel of a man. And he's like, I 100% believe that you feel everything that you're telling me that you feel. I don't care what a textbook says. You're highly intuitive. You're in touch with your body. You know how you feel. So I have the lower lobe of my left lung removed. And of course, they sent it out for pathology, whatever they remove from your body, they sent out. And those two little tiny nodules that they were like, probably nothing. We can't biopsy them. They'll get tested in pathology, were each cancer themselves.
Mm,
I had 3 different cancers sitting on my lung. And when they called to tell me, I went, I freaking knew it. And they were like, we know you knew it. We know it.
yeah.
And he said to me, you saved your life. You literally saved your life because you would not, the average person, this would have progressed to stage 4 before they felt anything or before,
Mm,
symptoms started to come up. I was stage 1. So I was so lucky. All of the cancer sat on my lung. It didn't infiltrate my lung and nothing got into my lymph. So the cure was just removing that section of my lung. I didn't need chemo. I didn't need radiation. I just get monitored every 6 months. So now, as I'm recovering, I'm thinking about what am I going to do now? I want to kind of change up my business, blah, blah, blah. And which is really funny because I wrote a whole book on figuring out what you want to do. I'm like literally reading my own book. Like, okay, I need to go back and redo these steps. Like, how do I
yeah.
want to handle this? And I'm spitballing ideas with my sister because, I have a coaching business, but I scaled back because I felt so crappy. I really couldn't take on new clients at the time, right?
Yeah.
So I said to her, of course I'm going to continue with my coaching business, but I had a podcast, but I wasn't loving it. I want to do something different. And she's like, you always know stuff. Just do something about what you know. And I'm like, you know what? That's it. I freaking knew it. A podcast about intuition. I want people to tell me their stories of when they knew something. Did they follow the knowing or not? Was it favorable or not? And I have to say, like, I'm in pre-production for it. You came on, we did your story. It's been so much fun talking to people and hearing their stories and also, what they think intuition is.
Yeah. Yes. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting that you grew up in a cemetery. Let's
Yeah.
just put it that way, right?
Yeah.
Like every
Right.
day.
Every day.
And and how and this is so common, isn't it? I mean, children see
Mm-hmm.
things and know
Mm-hmm.
things, but
Mm-hmm.
as we get older, that it's squashed. Society, whatever pressures we just it gets tamped way down, if not like gone, in the sense that
Yes.
we tamped it away, so it's just not even
Yes.
there. And then becoming, and then re like re not reimagining, but just being in touch with yourself again, like coming back to that
Yes.
knowing that you had when you were a little girl that
Mm-hmm.
saved your life years later.
Mm-hmm.
And this journey of meditating, I mean, I want to talk about that because yes, I agree, like a year is a really long time. However, it is something that when you were doing this 1 minute meditation, like, was it guided? Did you just do it yourself? Like, I just want to give tools to people. Like, is there
Sure.
something that you did?
So what I did was I was like, I need something that's gonna like keep me going too. Right.
Mm,
And a friend of mine told me, a friend of my sister's who told me, put the app Insight Timer on your phone. And it's a free app. You could get the paid version if you want, but there's a free version, which is fantastic. And every 10 days that you use it, every consecutive, right? It has to be 10 consecutive days. You get a little star. It's called a milestone. And I was like, oh, I need to get that star. And then another 10 days, ooh, I'm going to get another star and then another star. And I use that to help keep me going, right?
Yes.
Now, some days I only meditated for a minute. That was my deal. I only had to do it for a minute, right? But some days it was longer. Some days I did guided meditations and I knew how to meditate, right? Because I had started 5 years prior to this. I just wasn't doing it every day.
Mm.
So some days I did a silent meditation where I just focused on my breath or however I did it. And then other days I did guided meditation. And I just showed up every day and let whatever was going to unfold, unfold. And what I didn't realize at the time was I let my intuition decide how I was going to meditate, right? Like
Mm.
I would show up, would get on that. I used to, in my old house, I had like this big purple chair in my living room that I loved. And I would sit in that chair and I would open the app and it would be like silent. And then I would just put the timer on, or it would be like guide it. And I would like, do a guide it. And I just let it be whatever it was going to be every day.
Yes, and I think that that's such an important thing because when you say I'm going to do it for a minute,
Hmm.
but I was curious if it went longer at times.
Yeah.
But the fact that you say, okay, I'm going to do this for a minute. I mean, we all have 60 seconds in our day.
Yep.
Um, no matter what anyone says, we have 60 seconds. And so therefore, it's like you've given, okay, I'm not going to have to do it for 30 minutes a day. Like a small incremental 1 minute. If it goes longer, it goes longer. But then as you're meditating, you're tapping into your intuition, you're tapping into your breath. An insight timer is amazing. I
Hmm.
highly recommend everybody get it. And you are tapping into your intuition. And was there, so when you talk about intuition, you said what some people think intuition is. I'm curious I'm actually curious what you mean by that. Like, so in your view of like intuition, what is that? What does that look like?
I think it's like God talking to you. Like leading, your higher self, like this highest version of yourself, right? And just like getting a message from it. And like, this is what you need, or this is what's good for you right now, or try this. It's giving you some sort of direction. It's you, even though I said it was God, because I feel like God is in all of us, right? And you're just listening to yourself. And I think something that let me just go back to the meditation part, first of all. It's not easy to sit in meditation. And I've been meditating for what, like over 12 years, what's it, 7 years, like every single day. There are days that I am fighting myself the whole time. My mind is everywhere, right? And then there are days that I'm like, oh, that was juicy and delicious. But I don't judge any of it. I just let it be whatever it is, because if I were to start beating myself up for the times that I can't focus, I would never be able to stick with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I teach people to meditate like in any way that's going to work for them. There's so many different ways to meditate, right? It doesn't just, go from silent to guided. There's so many different things that you can do, different ways to
Yeah.
meditate. So I just, whatever I'm feeling, that's what I do. And I really feel like, your intuition is like your higher self giving you that direction, and it's your voice. And I believe the thing that messes a lot of people up is, and I used to wonder, like, why don't I hear, this can't just be me. Why don't I hear like cymbals crashing or thunder and then like a voice booming, like, Deborah, do this today, or Deborah, go here? That's not how it is
No.
at all.
No, it'd be great because then it's like, can you write that
Right.
down and put it in a book? And then I could just read it and just do that thing.
100%.
But no, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. It's just your voice. And it's oftentimes soft, but it never changes. It's steady. The message will be steady. If you keep
Mm.
coming back to the same thing over and over again, the answer is not going to change.
Yeah, it's so interesting when you were talking about your business. I get this question a lot. not a lot, but when I talk about trusting your intuition, trusting
Mm-hmm.
your gut, and how it's always right. And people will say, well, yeah, but I was trusting my intuition and I went out, started dating that guy or that woman. And like, I'm like, no, 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 no.
No.
Like, we're talking about trust. You knew there were flags. If we were really honest with ourselves, we go, yeah, I thought no, because you knew there were flags. Your friends are waving the flag. Something's in you going, no, you just chose to ignore it. But when you tap in and you truly tap into your intuition and your gut, you are always right. Always.
I just was on a guest on another podcast last night and we talked about this. And it really comes down to, do you trust yourself?
Yes.
And you need to be able to trust yourself so that you make the decisions that are good and right for you. You know deep down what is good and right for you. And we get distracted by maybe how attractive someone is, how entertaining someone is, or like what they could provide for you if that's your thing. And we give people, I really feel like, too much of a benefit of the doubt. People show you who they are. I think Maya Angelou, right, has that famous quote, like, when people show you who they are, believe them.
Believe it.
People
Yeah.
will show you who they are, and you choose to make a story and change it up.
Yes. And to fit into whatever
Yes.
whatever story, because we all have this circle and that's a story and there's gaps in it. And we as humans have to fill those gaps. Like, we have to make it a complete circle. So we fill it, even if it's not true. And I do find, do you think too, like when you were saying, like, you have to trust yourself, but I think there's also this part that you also need to forgive yourself for decisions
Yes.
you've made that you didn't trust yourself. Like, get over it. Like, we need to work through it, forgive yourself, and then bring, because that's what I love about what you're doing, is like you're coming back to yourself, that little girl that was always there, and it's like you come back to her, and now as an adult teaching other people how to do that, how to
Yes.
breathe and meditate. And the other part of it is really taking action. So I'm like a very action oriented
Mm-hmm.
person, but that is action by doing 1 minute, 10
It
minutes.
is.
Yeah.
You're moving yourself forward, right? Like, you're always moving yourself forward, and circling back to what you said about forgiving yourself. 100%. It's so important. Like, we're human, we make mistakes. We're not going to get it right every single time, you know? And
Especially
okay.
when it comes to boys. Tell you what, when I was in school,
Oh,
oh my God, did I get it wrong numerous times.
same. And, we were taught as little girls that if a boy is mean to you, it means he likes you. That is such bull.
Bullshit. I know,
Right? And
right?
when I was raising my kids, I told them very differently, especially my daughter. Like, if a boy is mean to you, that doesn't mean he likes you. That means something's wrong with him, and get away from him.
Yeah.
And I also told my sons, girls that are like throwing themselves and will do anything, and you need to watch for the girls who say you do things that you didn't do because they want attention or drama or whatever. Like, protect yourselves. If I don't care how attracted you are to somebody, it doesn't mean they're for you.
No, that's
No.
exactly right. And when
Yes.
you take it from the eyes or the mind and you drop it into your body, I
Mm-hmm.
always tell people, like, let's take it out of, I mean, not that you put your logic or your brain or your thoughts to the side, but
Yep.
let's just drop it into your body. And what does that feel like? Like, what is actually happening? Because you go into a room, right? And it's like, ooh, like, especially if you're an empath, you go into a room,
Yes.
that energy sucking, draining, you can feel it right away. Or you go into a room or you spend time with somebody and you're like, ooh, that energy, that more high vibe, right? Instead of the
Yes.
low vibe. Yeah.
Yes. And I was always the person that, when your friends think, or your fam, whatever, think somebody's great, and you meet them and you're like, you need to run from that person. And then they're like, you're just jealous that I have somebody else, another. And I'm like, I don't want don't bring them around. I don't want anything to do with that person. And then,
Yes.
down the line, something will happen and they'll be like, they sucked. And I'm like, I told you they sucked.
Yes.
And you acted like there was something wrong with me. Like I was jealous you had a different friend.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, my fiance, he is very much like that. I mean, he's in the police as well, so I think there's a bit of training. But I think
Yes.
genuinely, like if he's like, oh, there is, and he's always been right. But my
Mm-hmm.
youngest daughter, Alexa, is exactly the same way. I mean, she can walk into it and be like, nope,
Yep.
and she'll tell you too. So she sounds a lot like you in that sense. Like she'll tell you, be like, nope, like that person, don't do it. Doesn't mean anybody listens to her, but she's like, I
Exactly.
told you so.
And I have three people in my life like that I'm related to and that are the worst judges of character that I have ever seen. And I'm
Mm,
like, are you kidding? And they never listen.
mm.
And one of them is my mom. And, from the time I was little, and I would tell her things and she would not listen to me. And then things would happen. And she was like, oh my God. And I'm like,
I
Mom,
should
I
have
told you
listened.
they sucked, or they were going to ask you for this, or they were going to do this crazy thing, or, this wasn't going to be okay. And it's so funny that I think that helps strengthen it when you're
Mm,
near people who are so clueless about it or who don't, pay attention in that way. But I also think like I want to see the best in people. And then I'll get that answer from people that are terrible judges of character. Well, I just want to see the best in people. Well, I do too, but I want to see the truth of people.
yes, good point.
I want to
Yeah.
see the truth.
Yes. And
And if they're,
there's boundaries and
yes,
here's my, but don't cross it. Like do not cross it because you have to protect yourself as well, don't you?
yes,
And I wonder,
yes.
so and that, that part of the intuition, the intuitive work that you do, the breath work that you do, um, the coaching that you do. Obviously, the podcast, I freaking knew it. When I saw that, I was like, I totally knew it. I need to speak to Deborah. We have to talk. Um, so I love that whole, what you're doing is amazing.
Thank
But
you.
what is it? So you're still doing your coaching business, you're
Yes.
teaching people meditation and breath work. Like tell
Hmm.
us about what you're doing, because there's going to be people who are listening that I want to direct them. Obviously we'll put all your details in the show notes,
Hmm.
but tell us how, what you're doing and how we can find you.
Sure. So my coaching, mostly I work with women who are like at some crossroads in their life, be it maybe they're a new empty nester, is it a divorce? Do they want to leave their job? They want to start a job? And that's the majority of, my coaching clientele. Um and I traditional, whatever you want to call it, life coaching. But I also incorporate energy work. I'm a Reiki master. I also highly promote meditation and breath work. And, some of my clients are like, I'm not digging that part. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. We don't have to do that part. But most of my clients are open to it all,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you can find me on my website, deborah.atella.com. I'm on Instagram at Deborah Atella. The podcast will be launching by the end of the summer. It hasn't, hit the airwaves yet, but it's on its way. But like I said, the majority of my coaching clientele are trying to figure out the next steps of their lives and
Yeah.
how can we get there. And I also have a book, Is This Job My Jam? The Guide for Grownups Who Still Don't Know What They Want to Be.
This
And
is the one you had to read for yourself, is it?
I did. I actually went back and I'm like, let me reread a couple of these chapters right here that I wrote this. Um, and it was very helpful. Look, I started the
You're like,
podcast.
I am so smart.
I
Look
know
at
what I'm
what I've
talking
written.
about. So funny. I'm like, I really do know what I'm talking about. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Um, And in the book, I have a program that I take you through on making decisions. And it's not just figuring out if your job is your jam. And I'll tell you that 99% of the people that come to me to figure out if their job is their jam, their job's not the problem.
Mm,
Their job does not end up being the problem. Okay. But I take you through you can use the program that's in the book just to help you make any decision, not just about your job.
mm,
And it's so insightful and helpful. And literally, when I sat and I was like, I got to break it down. And I like
mm.
broke it back down for myself because it was the same system that I had used originally to start my business. Just was like, oh, what will serve me? And I figured it out. And this is what I took myself through. And
Yeah.
then, this is what I take people through. And I'm like, let me go through this again. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I'm on track here, but I'm just a little off here. And what else do I want to bring into my life? And let
Yeah.
me bring this in. How can I bring this in?
Yeah,
That's what I did.
absolutely. Fantastic. I mean, and there's like really important tools that someone can use. And I always say, try it on and see if it fits. Try this and see if it
Yes.
fits. If it works, tweak it if you need. But so, and we'll put, the link to your book and like all of your social media and all
Awesome.
that,
Thank you.
because then, people can come to you and they can be
Mhm.
like, okay, yeah, I need to connect. So no, I mean, your story is it's your story, but it's very inspiring. It's I think such an important message to tap into your intuition, quiet your mind, because that's when it just flows. um and I envision like you tapping into your intuition, but into your body, like you said, and you could feel the life leaking out of you. And I think if we can learn to do that, oh my God, like not just physical stuff that happens,
Mhm.
because not everybody goes through what we've been through, but what could come out if we just quiet our mind for 1 minute a day.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what I find too that people discount is doing tasks. Things like washing the dishes, sweeping the floor, taking a shower, driving in the car. They're all opportunities to be quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're all opportunities to be quiet. Don't put the radio on, don't put a podcast on, don't whatever. Just like pay attention to you when you're doing those things.
Yeah.
And if, you're somebody who really, because meditation, like I said, it's not easy, right? But there's all different ways to meditate. But your mind is never going to go completely blank and
Yeah.
completely silent for like, look, we're not like monks sitting on the
Yeah.
top of a mountain, right? Like that's not
Yeah.
happening for the average person. And so just give yourself the grace of, I tried this today. I'm going to do it again tomorrow. It's called a practice, a meditation practice, because all you're
Exactly.
doing is practicing every day.
Exactly. It does. Yeah, that's so true. Takes practice. It's like you don't just go to yoga and then all of a sudden be able to, lift your leg
Right.
over your head and wrap it around and do, all that stuff they do. Um,
Yeah.
but it is a practice. You're so right. And one of the things that's so interesting, we always have like earphones in, and I see people
Mhm.
walking with it, just always noise. And
Yes.
so if we can just alleviate some of the noise,
Yes.
imagine what comes in. I know some people, like some clients and friends, are like very creative. So they make crochet, or they do art, or they're drawing or whatever. And that for them is very meditative. So it's
Yes.
like, do that thing that just calms your nervous system as well, and your mind. So it's
Oh,
amazing. No,
yes.
it's so, so true, so practical. So again, I'll put all the details in the show notes, but thank you so much for sharing your story and spending time with us. Is there anything that that we haven't covered, that you want to just, drop that golden nugget for everyone?
I just want to like go off of what you just said. Like try things. Try different things. Like maybe it's doodling, maybe it's painting, maybe it's gardening, maybe it's just taking a walk. Find out, start paying attention when you do things or when you try things. What does it feel like in your body? Does it open you up a little bit or does it shrink you? And start to
Mm,
pay attention to those feelings and do more of the things that open you up or light you up. And you don't have to make it your job and you don't have to do it all day, every day, but find those little pockets that you can do those things that make you happier,
Amazing.
right?
100,000,000%. I couldn't agree more.
Mhm.
That's a great nugget to leave on. Thank you so much, Deborah, for spending your time with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much. This was so much fun.
So much fun. Speak to you soon.